was thousands of dollars every day just to speak to managers and brokers and people on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and all of that.
Kylie Merritt, the co-founder and managing director of Ausbiz.
Our go-live date ended up being 10 days into the first lockdown.
She's got a great story, obviously having set up a business with Koshi, but also a career before that in front of the camera.
So you're in the middle of interviewing someone and someone is in your ear, do this, there's a line coming in here, we've got vision of this. You have to be able to do 12 different things at once. The shit is really hitting the fan.
Kylie Merritt on Ticker Talk.
Welcome to Ticker Talk. Today's guest is Kylie Merritt, co-founder and managing director of Ausbiz. Welcome to Ticker Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Kylie, you have a very interesting career. It's a common theme has been obviously the media, but you've really been in and around markets the whole time, and that's why you're on Ticker Talk. But let's maybe start at the beginning of your foray into journalism, which started back in Orange.
I thought you were going to say the year. I'm like, please don't say the year. Please don't say the year. Yeah, I went to university in Bathurst, where a lot of journalism students go, and I got a job sort of, I think, halfway through my third year at Prime Local News in Orange, just up the road. So that's where I started. The markets I was covering, I did actually cover the cattle and sheep markets.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So I did understand the whole buy-sell routine.
Did you do any greasy wool futures?
I don't believe so. I think it was more. I don't think we did wool out there. It was the
livestock.
It was livestock. Yeah. So it was the per kilo prices that they'd fax in because we didn't have the internet.
Yeah.
God, I'm really old. They would fax in all the prices.
We
from
all remember
all
the fax machine.
the markets from around like Dubbo and Canamble and everywhere, and then you'd put them into the graphics and read them out on the local news.
So that's it. So it was basically like the All Ords did this. For Prime in Orange, it was this is what happened to cattle prices today.
So because our viewing region was sort of Lithgow to Broken Hill, so there's a lot of farming communities in that area.
This is the journey from Bathurst to Barangaroo.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I love the central west of New South Wales.
Yes.
My parents had a farm out there many years ago. Why didn't you stay out there and specialise in animal husbandry or something? What brought you to Barangaroo then, or Sydney generally?
Well, I'm allergic to cows, so I used to get really bad hay fever.
Yes.
Look, I think at the time, honestly, I had a boyfriend who lived in Sydney, and I was coming up here every weekend. And I'd already spent, 3 years in Orange and 3 years before that at uni. So at that stage, I'd spent about a quarter of my life in the country. And while it was great fun and the best learning experience, I think any journo who starts in a regional newsroom can then go to Sydney or Melbourne or New York and deal with anything. Yeah. Because the output is crazy compared to sort of what was happening here. But yeah, I applied for there's a little newspaper ad, as we used to. That's how you used to apply for jobs. There were ads in the paper, and it was for someone who had experience in TV and radio journalism, which I did. And it just said, you didn't need finance experience, but it would be positively looked upon. Yeah, or cattle. Well, here's the story. So it turned out to be producing. I didn't say it in the ad. It was producing for David Koch. When he was the finance editor at Seven. He wasn't really famous at that time. I didn't really know who he was.
Okay.
But I often said it was you that made him famous.
Well, clearly. He really owes me. So I came up to Sydney and met him at a cafe, and he asked me what I knew about markets, and I told him about the cattle and sheep markets, and he figured it was pretty much the same thing. So away we went. Yeah. So I started, he had his own family company. So we used to produce a lot of finance news. It was strange back in those days. A lot of the big media companies would kind of outsource their finance news. So we provided finance news to Yahoo, to both 2GB and 2UE at one time, to Seven, and then later on we got the contract to finance news for Sky as well.
And because it was Yahoo 7 was a
I've got a feel. Was it
company,
Yahoo 7 or was it just Yahoo back then? But it was. I had to go in 3 times a day and put in what the market was doing because the technology, you still just couldn't get a direct feed from the ASX to update the numbers.
And so what
Times have
happened
changed.
after that when Koshy then became famous and
Yeah.
was on Sunrise? Were you working alongside then, or were you going into a different sort of
When I
trajectory?
because we'd been doing a lot of work for Sky, I was kind of mostly based there anyway.
Okay.
And in the interim, David and I started a little production company which became Pinstripe Media, which is
Okay.
now just this year now owned by Private Media. And that was, a media production company specialising in business and finance. We used to make TV shows for Channel 7. And then Sky decided, this was in 2007, that it would launch a 24-hour business channel, being Sky News Business.
Yes.
And Angelo, the CEO, brought me back from whatever I was doing at the time, working with David to start that. And that's when the whole 24-hour business news thing sort of began.
Yeah.
But were you hoping that relationship you had with David, was that because you wanted to host Sunrise? And
Because
instead you got
I
off
wanted to
Sky
host
After Dark? I mean,
because I wanted to host Sunrise.
Yes. How did it lead to
No.
business? And
No. Well, because I started working with David and just doing business news, and I think for the first 6 months I had absolutely no idea like what was going on.
Yes.
It's pretty like you turn up to a press conference and you're given 60 pages. Here's your financial results, and just have a quick flick through those, and then interview the CEO of Telstra, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
But I got up to speed relatively quickly. I still don't know everything, but I know enough to.
it'd be dangerous, as they say,
Well,
to run your
exactly.
own network.
Yeah, and I think, like anything, once you sort of get absorbed in something, the reason I loved finance so much as compared to sort of general news, like you'd get to the end of a general news day, a cat up a tree, an accident, whatever, it doesn't sort of relate to anything else a lot of the time. Like it's done, but with business, the longer you're doing it, when something happens and I remember when that CEO
There's
was
more of a
there
thread.
and then he did
Yeah.
this and then this happened, and it's super interesting. It's quite gossipy. Like
Yeah.
it's it has that sort of
Sure
that
they do.
story. So yeah, I got really into it. I went and did an MBA, largely just to learn the basics of business, because I'd never had any exposure to it at all. It certainly wasn't. I certainly didn't go to university thinking I should be a finance reporter.
Yeah.
And yeah,
But
here I
how
am.
did you've said that once a journo, always a journo. You've said that in some interviews
Yeah.
I've seen. But why
How
did you
many
make the
interviews
switch?
have I done? Not many.
Oh, look, I mean,
Matthew's
we
watched them all.
I don't, there must be like two.
I've got a shelf full of your
Shelf full of them,
DVDs.
right? Okay.
But you did move. You moved away from being a journalist
Yeah.
to the other side of the camera, the other side of the the newsprint, to being a commercial
Yep.
person, being a founder. So why that switch? What was the impetus for that?
As a finance journalist, you start to understand a lot more about businesses and how they're run. And that started to really interest me as well. When I was at Sky, there's been a lot of change over the years in the way that sort of commercial contracts are done. It used to be in the olden days, these people over here make the content and these people over here sell the advertising, and it's simple. There was no integration, et cetera, et cetera. And, that's all had to change over time because there's just not enough money just selling 30-second TV slots. So the people who are really good at figuring out how to work with commercial partners are often the people who have a deep experience in making the content because, particularly in finance, they actually understand what these businesses are doing, what their challenges are. They understand the audiences really well. And so I started sort of dabbling, I suppose, in that at Sky. I was sort of running the business channel, still doing a little bit of on air if, people were off sick or whatever. But I think by that stage I'd not lost my passion for being on TV. I was very happy to be behind the scenes, and as the time's gone on, I've been more and more happy to not. I don't like doing stuff like this except with you guys, obviously. So yeah, and then I started to find that commercial side really interesting as well. But with a business like Ausbiz, I mean, we're so small. We may not look small, but it's a really small team. When we launched, I was on air for the first 6 months because Scuddy was still at Business Insider, and they wouldn't let him out of his contract. So, I was filling in for that first period. And I still consume news probably too voraciously sometimes. And, I still regularly pop up in the group chat with how about this? How about this? Can I book this guest? And I think now the team just gets annoyed with me because
It's Kylie again. Another great idea.
change things and okay, you guys do you and I'll just sit over here and sell ads. It's fine.
On the topic of consumption of news, I mean, Sky News Business was around for a little bit. It's been very, very difficult to get traction in televised. But now, obviously, the US is a much bigger market, but there are multiple channels there.
Yeah.
Other countries don't really have like the US either. I mean, there's not really dedicated business channels in the UK or Canada. Is that because it's a uniquely US thing, or it's we just don't have critical mass here?
Oh, there is one in Canada.
Is there?
Well,
Okay.
there's a Bloomberg sort of Canada situation. I guess when you look at somewhere like Europe or Asia, it makes sense that there is, a CNBC and a Bloomberg for those regions.
It's like a regional footprint.
Yeah. But I think what's different in the US and what's different in Australia, and I don't know this for sure, but I think there would be fewer sort of self-directed investors in Australia who are interested in, Korean stocks or Japanese stocks or whatever, because when you're investing, it helps to be able to really understand the businesses. And so, having access to a CNBC or a Bloomberg Asia with only, small amounts of Australian content and certainly very little coverage of the smaller end of the market is, not as relevant and not as valuable. So I think there's always been, not to say that the market that I have is gigantic.
Yes.
There is a sizable market of people who, are running their own super funds and who are self-directed. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to sit around and watch people yapping on about equities all day.
Let's hope there's some.
But there's enough to, start to build that community. And there's still, we still have 40 people roughly signing up to the platform every day. Just organically. We probably haven't done as good a job as we could have in finding those people, so they've kind of found us. But it continues to grow, and the groups, the audience that is rusted on, Ausbiz fans. I mean, they watch for an hour every day. Like it's a big commitment for them.
Hope you're enjoying this episode of Ticker Talk, sponsored by the National Stock Exchange of Australia, the leading exchange in Australia for startups and scale-ups. Follow us on LinkedIn for market updates, news and events.
Ausbiz. You do like a challenge because, am I correct, Ausbiz was launched just when a little pandemic gripped the world.
I mean, to be honest, we didn't have a choice. We'd been working on it for sort of 8 months, I think, by that point, and we had a go-live date and we'd signed a lease and we had staff. And the only way we were going to make money to pay for all those things was to be live. So there wasn't really any other option. But our go live date ended up being 10 days into the first lockdown. So it did make everything incredibly tricky. Obviously, we had to be really careful with all of the team and the people who were building the studio. So, we had people coming in the middle of the night to do the studio and crossovers, and the presenters couldn't sit. If you go back and look at the very early videos, you had people in the studio sitting at, either end of whatever the length we had to be. So that it all looked very weird.
Thank goodness for widescreen.
Thank goodness for widescreen. And the toughest thing was, the whole business plan was that people were going to be in the studio. And that we were going to have a camera in Melbourne and then our studio in Sydney. And so there would be no remote interviews because at that time, very few, TV networks would have been doing interviews over Zoom. Like that was just it looked terrible, and we were all very snooty about, we're not going to do that. So luckily, just before COVID hit, the guys building the studio said, are you going to do remotes? And I said, no, they're all going to be live. And he said, I've got this, I've got access to this Skype TV broadcast thing. it's secondhand, it's $4,000 or whatever, but it means you can have people remote. Do you want it? And I was like, I don't think we're going to, oh yeah, okay, like just as a backup. And if we hadn't have had that, we actually would not have been able to do any interviews because we didn't have anyone in the studio for months.
Yeah. But conversely though, you've said, again, in one of those many interviews that you've given over the years.
Make me sound like a media tart, yeah.
Your words, Kylie, your words. Self-reflection, those are good things.
Yes.
But you've said that perversely it ended up being a boon for the business because everyone was at home.
Yep.
Yeah.
They were watching their television screens. They were consuming
The market
the
was
media.
volatile.
Yeah.
Very
Volatile
volatile.
markets. New investors entered the market. People started to trade more.
Yep.
They were hungry for information, and you were able to provide it. Is that a fair
Yeah,
assessment?
no, it's definitely true. It just would have been useful to not have all those other constraints around. The best thing was our landlords at Barangaroo, because no one else was in the building. We had sort of passes because we were news media, but the entire rest of Barangaroo was working from home. So everyone had a car space,
Yep.
which is kind of unheard of, right? When it is 23-year-olds straight out of uni and
Yes.
we're like, oh, here's your car space.
Yeah.
So that was nice. And then when everyone else came back, we had to start getting the training.
What's the great thing about the Ausbiz model means you get a lot of insights
Yep.
in terms of viewership and what works, what doesn't. What is a typical Ausbiz viewer?
A man.
Or who?
A man. It skews very heavily male. Older. So we didn't sort of set out to make a product for a certain audience type.
Yep.
Our view was sort of anyone who's interested in markets, here we are. The audience is sort of self-selected over time. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. We have a very high proportion of retirees or semi-retirees. These are the people that have an hour or two who can they actually have the time to spend watching the show. They are, largely wealthy, self-directed, running their own super funds. It's who you would expect. There's no real surprises there. And like I said, we would like to broaden that out. I think in the media landscape here, there are a lot of people doing a fantastic job of that beginner to intermediate space. And we've kind of ended up at the more sort of intermediate to professional. There's a lot of people in markets who watch, obviously, see what their opponents and their friends and everyone's doing and saying.
Are you up on the dealing room screens or
some of them, yeah. I've seen them, and then sometimes you walk past a cafe or something in the CBD, and you're there, and you're like, oh, hi. So yeah, look, it's not surprising to me who is consuming the content. Probably the one thing I would say is a lot of the data that we have comes from the people who are the most engaged. So it does kind of skew it a bit more to people who would have time to participate in that. But, it's a great audience. They're always very happy to sort of provide feedback and they get really involved. So it's, it's good.
And are people watching it live or they're watching?
Mostly on demand. Mostly on demand, yeah. So the theory really is the live stream that we do through the day. It's obviously important and we cover what the market's doing at any point in time and we cover the news, but largely, the majority of stream starts are on demand, and that live stream is really there to feed that engine of interviews that we do. So a lot of the live stuff, the markets coverage and the news coverage wouldn't then end up as being consumable. So it's more, I wouldn't say it's evergreen, but there's content on there. You could go in on the weekend and sort of catch up and it wouldn't be old and smelly because it's not super news related. It's more, investment strategy, deep dive into equities, small and large cap, probably skewing more small.
So it's got
they're interested
good
in.
shelf life.
When you talk about content,
Yeah.
Previous occupant of your seat, Liz Knight, said when she writes about Rupert Murdoch, she gets 5 times the normal viewership or hits on articles. Do you have a sugar hit or some content that people just really respond well to?
Yeah. So there are, I hate to use the term celebrity, but there are fund managers that are super popular. But a lot of it will come down to the title. So if the title on a video insinuates that this is a stock tip or three stock tips,
that's what they love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we try and steer clear of the clickbaity stuff, but, three
At the end of
stocks,
the day, you are.
three stocks, Harry is selling, two stocks, Claire is buying.
And do you think it's about the tips, or do you think it's actually some of the fund managers have the personality or the profile that people want?
I think it's mostly about the tips. I think there are definitely there are definitely certain faces that pop up that will get more traction than others.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's more kind of what they're talking about than anything else.
So how do you keep it going? And markets, as you know, are dynamic. How do you keep Ausbiz dynamic and changing and moving, or have you found its perfect niche? And
I don't think it's ever perfect. You do roll along with the trends. So but sometimes it's only small things. It's like, we're changing our taxonomy from early next year because we're launching a whole new vertical called Retire, which is. We're not making any new content. It's just so happens that probably 30% of the content we do is directly, around accumulation or decumulation or SMSF strategies or something. So we're putting it all in one place because we know that we have, a huge retirement audience.
Yeah.
We're probably going to pull back on how much choice there is in terms of that, all the headings and stuff. So we're doing a lot more. I think to make it easy, for example, for people to find content about private credit. It doesn't mean we're doing more private credit stuff. It just means it's like, well, here it is.
Better packaging.
So better pay. Yeah, it's just.
Or making use, leveraging.
Yeah, and we do, every week Nadine sends around, these are the top 10 videos in terms of views from last week. And I think that gives people a very good idea of, what people like and what they don't. So you tend to start making more of that if you can.
Of course, back in the days of Sky News business, you'd turn up at the IPO, the listing ceremonies. Do you do live crosses to the stock exchange these days? That's just not a thing.
No, we very rarely go out. We don't have crews. I mean, part of that is cost.
Yeah.
But part of that as well is the complete shift in, we currently now use Teams, but we use Skype, whatever. You can access people in any country, anywhere, anytime from their desk if they can't get to the studio. So for what we do, we don't need to go out and shoot footage. Finance doesn't necessarily lend itself. It's like, oh, here's another file shot of, the ASX boards. Like, so we tend to not have to do that stuff anyway. But, you mentioned Sky. We were doing back in the Sky business days in the early morning, I think we were on from 5:30 a.m. or something. And that whole chunk before the Australian market opened was largely US. So we do, 4 or 5 US crosses every morning. And each one of those had to be booked through a fibre. It was thousands of dollars every day just to speak to managers and brokers and people on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and all of that sort of stuff. Like the costs of doing that, taking out satellite vans and all of that sort of stuff. And that's where I started. And, then we came through where we had the backpacks with the 4G cards in so you could, take your camera out and go live from there. And now it's just like we get really high-end commentators from the US and they just dial in from the office and, they're on Ausbiz.
And probably what you've just then describes why we don't have as big a media scene in Australia, because really when you go to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, it's 50% TV studio, isn't it? Yeah. It's all theatre.
It's all theatre.
There's actually not much trading going on there.
And do you miss not being on in front of the camera?
I mean, not at all.
With these changes, is there going to be a program, Kylie's Corner or something like that?
Well, only if you will co-host it with me, both of you, yes.
So
will it be sponsored by Stock Exchange?
Well, how many more television networks and stations have you got in you? Channels, business
as
channels?
In starting with them?
Yes,
I think I'm done. I think this will be it. Yes.
Well, that sounds like a good time for props.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Prop time, Kylie.
I brought 2.
Yeah, great.
The second one's a bit dull, so we don't have to talk about it. I wasn't sure if we would have.
Okay. Ah, okay. That doesn't look like a snowflake to me, so we can't talk about
It's a
skiing.
golf ball. Now I'm going to out myself as a boring old person who plays golf. But yes, it's a golf ball.
Okay. Well,
That's where business gets done.
That's not why I brought a golf ball. So the backstory to this is my parents, they played golf when they were younger and then they took it up again when I was a teenager. And I used to call it a cult. Like they just were truly embedded in this group of people, and they travelled all the time and they were always at the golf course and always talking about golf. And I just thought it was so horrendously dull.
You're a golfing orphan.
I was a golfing orphan, yeah. I used to tell my mother that all the time. And then I got older. I met my now husband. He's a golfing fanatic.
Yes.
This is how these things
was
just
quite
perpetuate
good
through the generations.
back in his day. But, and still I was like, it's just sort of I was a bit embarrassed, like it's a bit of a daggy pastime to have because, he'd go and play golf with a bunch of 60-year-olds on the weekend and we were 30s, whatever. Yeah. And then now I have a son who learnt to play golf at a very young age thanks to everyone else in my family, but in the last 2 years has become I'm not going to say unhealthily obsessed, but obsessed.
Yes.
He is there, on weekends he could be at the golf course 12 hours a day, like from
There
when
could
it
be
opens
many
to when
worse
it
places
closes.
that he could be.
I'm
so-
very happy because you can actually, especially in school holidays, he can be dropped there at 6 and picked up at 6. Yeah. And it only cost us $17.50 in comp fees and a sandwich and, he's happy. But I decided earlier this year that if I ever sort of wanted to spend time, he's just turned 12. Yeah. So if I ever wanted to spend time with him, that perhaps I should be able to play. So I had a couple of lessons.
You've taken it up.
Well, it's actually, I hate to admit, it's surprisingly enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I understand now why so many people in business do it because it's even if you just do 9 holes, right? For me, that's 2 hours. Yeah. You've got to talking to people most of the time you don't know, so you have to sort of be thinking about being on your best behaviour and not dropping the F-bomb too much. And you're always sort of thinking about like, well, how am I going to get out of here and how terrible playing and all that. And so you actually don't think about work for 2 or 4 hours. And it's really the only time I've ever found – I never really had a hobby. My hobby has always been work, which is sad. So it's the first time I've found something that can actually take my mind off work for short periods of time and spend some time with my son.
It is I'm not a golfer at all. I mean, I always like that comment from Mark Twain that golf is a good walk spoiled.
Yes.
But it's an interesting game in that you're alone with yourself. You could be playing golf with a lot of people. It's you and the ball.
Yeah.
And the course, I guess. But you're in with your own mind a lot. So to your point, I guess it does mean that it can take you away from work worries and other things.
I'm probably less in my own mind, to be honest. I find it quite social.
I mean, generally or on the golf course?
On the golf course. There's always people so I play with a group of largely other women who are also learning. So, it's just shits and giggles really. Like no one's taking it particularly seriously. But when you kind of get to a point where I wouldn't say I'm good, but suddenly you can start to hit the ball without 12 air swings and you're like, oh, now I see how people get hooked on this.
This is Matthew's least favourite part of the program. Short, brief, rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire answers. The questions can be as long as I like.
Okay.
It's rapid fire answers.
This is all about you then.
We're going to rename it.
When
no, it's not
it?
about me. I'm a man for others, Kylie. You know that. Right. Some of these you may have touched on, but what was the hardest part of launching Ausbiz? Was it COVID that you mentioned or something else?
I think it was COVID.
So the timing.
Yeah.
But then, again, as you said, the timing actually worked.
I mean, the thing was it was going to be really hard anyway. And a lot of people have said, how much harder did you make it? And the answer is I don't really know because I'd never launched a business in the middle of a pandemic before. So, but there were very specific challenges that, sat on top of all of the other challenges that did just make it. Like at one point, I know this is meant to be rapid fire, so I apologise, but at one point we were actually considering, because the guys who were building the studio didn't want to come into the city, we were contemplating running out of my house. on
You
the
in
northern
Barangaroo?
beaches.
Is that where?
Huh?
Oh,
No,
north.
we were literally considering like Nadine and I hosting from my lounge room.
It sounds like the best investment you made, though, was that $4,000 second-hand Skype tour.
Yes, thank you, Skype TX. Give them a plug.
So what skills from on camera have you brought across to behind the camera and owning the cameras, as it were? Completely different skill set, or is there something that's continuous?
Probably the being able to deal with pressure. So I think what a lot of people probably don't know is when you're hosting on TV, there's always stuff going on in your ear. So you're in the middle of interviewing someone and someone is in your ear telling you, do this, there's a line coming in here, we've got vision of this. And so you have to be able to do 12 different things at once whilst seeming completely calm. And there's, often stuff like the shit is really hitting the fan and you can hear it in your ear and you just, everything's fine. So, I think dealing with multiple things going on at once and not getting too stressed about it would be.
So you mentioned that David Koch has been an important influence and partner along your journey. And you also spoke about celebrities and rock stars. So we have to bring the two together. Tell us something. One thing about David, the celebrity that he is, particularly in the finance world, that people wouldn't know about. What's he like behind the scenes?
He's got really bad handwriting.
Who knew?
I think people think that the David Koch persona that you see on TV is a persona and that he puts that on and whatever. It's what you see or what you saw when he was on Sunrise and all the other media stuff he does is exactly how he is in real life, like the daggy dad jokes, all of that. He does not put on a thing.
Yeah.
There is probably not that much that people would surprise people because they've watched him on TV for 21 years.
We had him at ASX a few times. And I think it's authenticity shines through.
Yeah.
Final question. Are financial social media influencers helping educate investors or not so much?
Ooh.
I mean, they play a role alongside what you do or they're very different?
Look, I think the finfluencers, I think it's unfair to lump them all in one. They're like in any, like in finance in general, there are people who are there for their own gains and they're probably doing things not nefarious, but, not entirely great.
Yes.
But I do think on the other end, particularly some of those young ones who, they've gone out and got themselves licenses and they have a way of speaking to younger people who might just be starting out in investing that, potentially, they're not going to want to listen to a bunch of 50, 60-year-olds talk about superannuation and all that sort of stuff. They are interested in crypto and ETFs or whatever it might be. So I think it's unfair to say, paint them all with the same brush. I think it's really important. You have to understand that people like consuming all different types of content, and if they want to consume it on TikTok with dance moves, I'm not going to play in that space, but they may well learn something useful.
Fair enough. No, I did say that was the last question.
Yes,
but I've just
okay.
thought of another one. And again, it comes from this stockpile of interviews and things you've done in the past.
Can you stop?
You were described as a disruptor.
Oh, who said that?
Probably your year 3
Oh,
school teacher.
that's true.
But
My year
since
5
then-
teacher said that for sure, yeah.
Since then, that's how you've been described in the industry.
Yes.
Is it a title that sits well with you? Do you like being a finance media disruptor?
I mean, it's more about survival. What the business plan for Ausbiz, if I look back at that now, it makes no sense 6 years on. Everything's changed so much. So we do need to disrupt. Like we launched a capital markets business. I have a hedge fund. I mean, not me personally, obviously. This is not financial advice. But, in the Ausbiz group, we have a hedge fund. We have model portfolios because we need to look for different revenue streams. And it made sense for the business. Now, is that disruptive or is it just sort of sensible in how you try and grow things when, media, you have to look at the share price of media companies. It's not a fabulous industry to be in.
No.
Well, Kylie Merritt.
That's a terrible way to end. Can we
No,
end on
you
something
are
more
our favourite
positive?
disruptor. Honestly, you are.
How many other disruptors have you had on? Well, none.
It used to be something, as you alluded to, it used to be something that was frowned upon.
Oh, okay.
Mr. and Mrs. Merritt Kylie was very disruptive today in class again. Now
Yeah.
it's up there with influencers, one of
Yeah.
the most aspirational of
I
jobs.
do not want to be an influencer.
But, look, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
For all
Thanks,
the disruption
Kylie.
and everything else, it was terrific. Thanks.
Great to have you
Thanks,
on
guys.
Ticker Talk.
Thanks for listening. For the latest news and updates, follow the National Stock Exchange of Australia on LinkedIn.